Especially with what just went down with the RTX 4070, Nvidia might have to consider just dropping the price of the entire 4000 series generation. As you know, many times with graphics card launches, everything goes pretty much above MSRP because it gets instantly scooped up, sold out. So if you just look up the RTX 4070 on PC Part Picker, which gives like a broad overview of what's in the market, you can see there's quite a few cards here that are going for MSRP. Because typically in a new generation, 70 class cards give you the previous generation's top tier flagship performance at a much lower price. If you look at the 3070, it was easily comparing to the 2080 Ti. If you look at like the 1070, it can easily compared to the 980 Ti, even the Titan X at the time.
Faster than a Titan X. Faster than a Titan X. $379 MSRP.
Because even though a lot of people aren't going to be gaming at 4K, the 3080 isn't even the top performing card in the last generation. From Nvidia's side of things, the 3090 is technically the top performer. It doesn't even beat the 3080 at 4K, and it only seems to about match it at 1440p. These are according to Linus Tech Tips here. You can even see a graph here from Hardware Unboxed as well. It seems to be very close at 1440p to the 3080. That's why many reviews of this card were kind of just like, it's meh. But you're just gonna be like, well, Nvidia's been doing this with the entire 4000 series. Like, it's been a trend that they seem to be overpriced. If you look at these cards, like the RTX 4080, I mean, typically you look for better price to performance generation on generation. 4080, bad value. Now the 4090 is a Halo product, so I will kind of excuse that. 4070 Ti, not that much better. If you look at their original MSRP, they aren't even getting up there at MSRP. 4080 is still terrible value compared to what the last generation had to offer. Because usually the 70 classic card is obtainable to quite a bit of people, not everybody. A lot of people love the value that it offers to them. When targeting more of a budget range with the 70 class card, people just aren't getting excited for this. $600 just is too much for the mid-range of people. That is as much as a lot of what the older cards used to cost. You see here the 1080 was one of the top end cards for the Pascal generation, and it went for $600, but now you're asking $600 for the 70 class card. Once you get lower and lower into these prices, it seems like people aren't just willing to just throw money at the wall. Like the 4080 didn't even sell that well, but you're still at that price point that people just have honestly probably too much money to spend on their components, and they're willing to buy whatever they can at that price range that they're allotting. Value isn't as much of a question, but you get down to the 70 classic card, it's $600, and you're talking to people that care more about value. And you're not really offering that much more with this generation. As pointed out by Not an Apple Fan, aka Paul, he was like, well, this card looks a lot more like a 60 class card, this 4070.
Yeah, very efficient. But you know why it's very efficient? Because it's a 60 class card. 60 class cards are usually very efficient.
The reason he was saying that is because the 60 class card typically runs pretty close to what the 80 class card did for the previous generation. Like, for example, the 2080 was pretty close to the 3060 Ti in performance. 1080 was pretty close to the 2060 in performance. So this generation, you look at the 4070 and you're getting performance extremely similar to the 3080. So it almost feels like it's more of like a 60 class card named as a 70 and then priced at $600. So what Nvidia hopes will sell you this 4070 card is DLSS 3 frame generation, which gives you fake frames in place of real ones in your games, so that you basically get double the frame rate. You don't actually get double the performance because your input lag is actually greater because it has to analyze and interpolate the frames in between. The card's power efficiency, it does perform just as well as the 3080, but the 3080 drew like about 320 to 350 watts, whereas the 4070 draws under 200. So that means you get a smaller cooler, you don't have to switch out your power supply or your case or anything like that, which is pretty good for upgrading too. The last thing they're relying on is AV1 encoding support, which for creators, the 40 series of cards might be like kind of what you need. Unfortunately, if you're like streaming and AV1 soon becomes the standard, you're gonna probably want to have a graphics card that can support it. But what Nvidia might be finding out is that these selling points might be more niche than they thought. Because even Nvidia themselves, they wrote this article, even seems like they are trying to cope that ray tracing and DLSS is what is selling graphics cards. They said it is the new standard in gaming, and that is just not true, because how in the heck are they getting this data? Because they said back in 2018, 30% of 20 series gamers embraced ray tracing, whereas now they say that 83% of RTX 40 series desktop gamers enable ray tracing. These numbers can easily be fudged because are these people that just turn on ray tracing to see what it looks like, to see if their card is fast enough, and then they turned it back off? Do they consistently use ray tracing, or does it take too much of a performance hit and people don't care as much as maybe this article is making you think? Especially with this generation, is they've only released cards that are really expensive, and you guess what the most selling card is probably is the RTX 4090, and that card is actually capable of doing ray tracing even at higher resolutions. So yeah, people that spend a lot of money on their graphics cards and are buying the latest technology are probably also checking out the latest technology in games. They're wanting to compensate with the RTX 4070 by saying that, hey, you can use frame generation and it makes it so much more powerful. This is like a top selling feature and just isn't. Not to mention with the 4070, and this is kind of a great, but kind of not. They only put 12 gigabytes of VRAM in this card. Yeah, you can turn down settings or whatever, but you're paying $600 for this graphics card on release with brand new games and a brand new graphics card. Man, it is hard to make the compromise, even at just 1080p, to have to turn down graphics settings for VRAM. Okay, you shouldn't have to do that on launch of a brand new graphics card. These cards should have enough VRAM in them that they aren't going to be limited by it just by turning up settings, especially around the launch of the card. This is just disrespectful, honestly. It's also to think that back in like November or October or whatever, people were talking about Nvidia wants to sell all their old stock, and that's why they're launching graphics cards that are so expensive so that all of the 30 series stock will go out. Well, has Nvidia been thinking that they already sold to all of the population that wants to buy cards at around this $600, $700 price point? Because you see that the 3080s are sold out and the 4070 is like the same performance as a 3080. So who is this 4070 really selling to that is looking to buy a graphics card? It's expensive for one, and then two, is that market already sold to? Are people just happy with how their current cards are performing with rasterization in games? Because even if we look at it, just a 6600 XT from AMD is a great performer at 1080p and even can do some 1440p gaming, but you aren't turning on ray tracing. And that gets you looking at like the 6700 XT and the 6800 XT also from AMD. They're rasterization primary cards that a lot of people maybe don't care about ray tracing as much as Nvidia wants to claim. With all this adding up to the 4070, and it's really not selling that well at the moment, at least from what we can tell, is Nvidia going to drop the price? Or are they going to drop the price of the 4000 series in general? It's unlikely that they will, at least for a while, especially because they're not being directly pressured by AMD. They are getting pressured by their last generation of cards, but in total, that's about it. The main reason why I don't think Nvidia is going to drop the price of the 4070 is because eventually this is going to be the only card that Nvidia offers brand new at the $600 price point. And if people are going to buy Nvidia, then they're gonna get this card. So I think over time, it probably will sell better. Even at the current moment, there isn't a huge market for people to actually buy it. And they might be waiting for that. And if they don't get pressured by AMD with a new generation card, then it's probably not gonna work out so well. And if AMD wants to be really competitive with this, they probably need to offer a card with better performance and more VRAM at $500 instead. And AMD will knock it out of the park with that card. But we'll have to see where that goes because this whole generation seems kind of whack. But that is about it for me with this RTX 4070. It's not selling as well as I thought it would. I didn't think it was going to be kind of a flop. Maybe Nvidia's way of thinking, maybe it wasn't a flop, but I have no clue. We don't really know what they are personally thinking at this time. I'm hoping that this was unexpected on their part and that they can learn from this mistake and possibly drop the price of this card in the future. But we don't know what's going to happen. We can only hope. So I'll see you guys in the comments and I'll see you guys in the next video. That's been it for me. Peace.